Okay, I'm back. So we're trying something new tonight. I'm going to try to live stream to YouTube at the same time that we're doing the Zoom recording that we typically do on this mental fitness with Doc Talbot. So let me get my slides up. I think it's going to be an interesting talk tonight because we're going to talk about the future of mental wellness. I do a talk like this periodically, every 6 months, 8 months or so. And one of the reasons is that this area changes really fast. This whole idea, whether we're talking about the area being mental wellness or the area being the microbiome or gut brain axis, they all obviously link together, right? If this is the first time that you're joining in on one of these calls, you might not know that they link all together, but a lot of the people who join in on these webinars, that's what we talk about, the linkage between the brain in your head, the second brain in your gut, and how they communicate with each other, right? That's what we call the gut brain axis. And that in large part determines your mental well-being. It determines your mood, your motivation, your mental focus, your stress levels, your resiliency, all that kind of stuff. And so that really is the future of mental wellness. And it because it's such a new emerging area, it changes. It changes rapidly. It changes. Changes every week in certain ways. So that's why I like to do this, the future of mental wellness, because there's so much new stuff coming out that is guiding our future. So as we get going through here, I want to do a couple of things. Here, I'm going to stop the share real quick because I want to get the chat window up and put that up on this monitor. Since this is a webinar, right, there's no way for people to unmute themselves and ask questions. So please put your questions in the chat. I'll have another webinar. I have another monitor up here. I will keep an eye on that as we go through, and we will, I'll answer those questions as is appropriate, depending on what they are and when they come in and all that kind of stuff. We still have a just about a minute to the top of the hour, so I'm gonna wait to start rolling through the slides until I get right to the top of the hour. So there, we should be back. Okay. So that's why I do this periodically because the field is changing so quickly. If you're part of my mental fitness community and you come on the weekly live calls, or I guess they're bi-monthly live calls now. Sometimes I'll share the research studies that come into my inbox, right? I have a PubMed search that goes every Friday, and there are hundreds of research articles that get published every single week around that idea of the microbiome, the gut-brain axis, mental well-being, stress resilience, all that kind of stuff. So literally hundreds of articles every single week that are coming out, and that can be a sort of a daunting task to go through all of that. But the good side of it is that it's new research, and if we can take that research and harness it and use it either for ourselves to help ourselves feel better, or if we're working with clients or patients or something like that to help them feel better, that's going to be good for everybody. Okay, so it just turned the top of the hour, so I'm gonna get rolling here. So tonight's topic is the future of mental wellness, how the microbiome gut brain axis is changing everything, literally everything. My focus is going to be on mental wellness, but I'm also going to talk about things like chronic inflammation. I'm going to talk about longevity. I'm going to talk about a number of different things that are sort of peripherally related to this area. And more importantly, I think, I love the science, right? I've got my science t-shirt on tonight. I love even more how that applies. How can we learn from this science and apply it to our real lives, or the lives of our, clients and patients, and actually get something out of it, right? So the science is interesting, but the science is mostly interesting when we apply it to a given situation. So if this is the first time that you're joining one of my weekly calls, you might be asking yourself, who is this guy? What's his background? Why is he qualified to talk about this kind of stuff? I am a psychonutritionist. And what you might be asking yourself, what the heck is a psychonutritionist? So here's some of my background. I'm not going to go through all these bullet points. You can go back and watch this in the replay. This will be up on YouTube. I'll post it to Facebook. I post it in the mental fitness community. But PhD in nutritional biochemistry. So a lot of what I talk about is biochemical in nature. I want people to understand if I'm recommending that you eat an apple, there's a biochemical reason that you should be eating that apple. Because it's going to change something in your microbiome. As a result of that microbiome change, there's going to be a signal that gets sent from your gut to a different part of your body. And I want people to understand the biochemical implication of that food choice or of that lifestyle intervention. Because if you can understand that, then you'll have a deeper appreciation for how your biochemistry drives your behavior, how your stress hormones change your appetite, how your neurotransmitters change your mood or your ability to get good quality sleep or whatever the case may be. I say all the time, and I'll say it several times tonight probably, biochemistry drives behavior, right? So it sort of, all my recommendations come from a biochemical lens. But it's within that biochemical lens that the biochemistry changes how we feel. That's the psycho part of it, right? That we're using nutrition to change our psychology, how we feel through the changes in biochemistry. So you can see all the other stuff, but that's sort of the gist of my perspective, right? My company that I run is called Three Waves Wellness. We were just recently named Startup Star for 2026, Startup of the Year kind of thing, because we're the first company that is really trying to bring all of these different pieces together under one umbrella. We're the holistic mental fitness company. And so a lot of what we do to help people feel better is by rebalancing their gut immune brain axis. I'm going to talk a lot about the immune system tonight because that is really one of the that's one of the future paths that is really going to be emerging now, but over the next couple of months. We do some VIP coaching if you're interested in that kind of thing, like working with me directly. You can find me. I'm pretty easy to find online, and we can discuss that. But we've established the world's first mental fitness retreat here in Plymouth, Massachusetts. We're holding our first retreat. Our first retreat of 2026 isn't going to be until September because we've been so busy with a whole bunch of different things. So look for that to be posted soon. They're very, very limited. We only have 7 rooms here at the bed and breakfast. It sells out usually in the first few minutes that I put it up. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And if you know that you're interested in something like that, again, you can find me pretty easily. We've certified about 1,000 mental fitness coaches or mental wellness coaches around the world, and we've developed an online mental fitness community where it's not just you get a certification and you're done. You get a certification, and then you're in this community where we're learning new things every day. We're learning from me, we're learning from new research studies that come out, we're learning from other students. So that's something you might be interested in. And just a few months ago, we launched a line of science-based nutraceuticals and an affiliate program so that coaches can share those products with their clients. And so I'll mention just a little bit about one of them, Zenith, a little bit later on. Just as sort of an example of where the field is going. Okay. I have a lot of free ebooks, so there's our retreats that we do, there's our certifications that we do, there's our community that we do, there's our products that we do. Those are all things that you have to pay for, right? Obviously. I also do a lot of free stuff. I do things like this, which is free. I have a whole YouTube channel. I do a lot of free ebooks. Here's one on adaptogens and nootropics and psychobiotics. Here's one on peptides, which are really hot right now. You can go to my website, doctalbott.com, and type in these addresses, level up to get the adaptogen book, peptide to get the peptide book. These are 100% free, and there's all kinds of other free videos and blogs and that kind of stuff to make this information as available and as useful as possible. This month, May, is Mental Health Awareness Month. So it's the end of May, right? We've got, I don't know, 4 or 5 days left until the end of May. I was just at the WOHASU stands for the World Happiness Summit. I was just there as a mental fitness coach about a week and a half ago. And in honor of Mental Fitness Awareness Month, we're offering a huge discount on our certificate on our main certification course, which is the Certified Mental Wellness Coach course. It is endorsed by a number of different third-party organizations: American College of Sports Medicine, National Association for Nutrition Professionals, American Nutrition Association, et cetera, et cetera. It's 16 continuing education credits. It's normally $12.99, which is a screaming deal for 16 high-quality CEUs. But we're doing it for $8.99. So you can save $400 this month if you get it before the end of the month. This deal goes away June 1st. So if you go to doctalbott.com/wohasu, you'll be able to take advantage of that. And you get free entry into the mental fitness community, which is typically a $300 membership. So you can see all this stuff there. So let's get into what we're going to talk about tonight, right? So how you feel is not just in your head. Here's a nice picture of me right here, standing with some of the other coaches at the World Happiness Summit just about a week ago in Lisbon, Portugal. And this is one of the things that I talked about, right? I talked about this to, the coaches and all the other attendees, that how you feel is not just in your head, it's also in your gut being considered this second brain. So the question, if we think about where the future of mental wellness is going, is this kind of a question. What if anxiety, focus, resilience, sleep, motivation, and even happiness are not just in your head, but they're deeply connected to your gut, your immune system, your metabolism, and your microbiome? And it's not just a what if. This is what the science is showing us, and this is the cutting edge of understanding how we feel, how we behave, how we show up in a given situation. So studying it as a nutritionist, as a psychonutritionist, I say this all the time: biochemistry drives behavior. And then we can use the teachings from this new field of nutritional psychology to understand that food mood connection, to understand why eating this food makes me feel crummy, or this food makes me feel agitated, whereas this food helps me feel calm, or that food helps me feel happier. Right. And it's all because of the biochemistry, right? The example I gave at the beginning, this apple, what does this apple have that's going to change the signals that go across my gut brain axis, that go from my microbiome, the bacteria that live in my gut, across my axis? Big part of that is your immune system, up to my brain. Is it the pectin? Is it the quercetin? Is it the whatever? Those are the signals that we can understand. And once we understand them, we can harness them and we can use them in a very precision nutrition way to help ourselves, but also help the people that we work with to rebalance all this signaling and feel better and perform at their peak. So that's the reframing of what mental fitness and mental wellness is all about. Let me just say this right now. I use the terms interchangeably. Mental wellness is actually a bigger term than mental fitness. Mental fitness is the high end of mental wellness, if you will. Mental fitness is our aspiration. That's where we want to be. We all want to be mentally fit. If our mental wellness is low, we might say that we're depressed. We might say that we're having anxiety. We might say that we're burned out. That it's not, we're not diagnosed with any diseases. You could be diagnosed with one of those diseases, like major depressive disorder, or generalized anxiety disorder, etc. So you could be diagnosed and you would be at the low end of the mental wellness continuum. Mental fitness is the high end of the mental fitness continuum, or the mental wellness continuum. So I often use those terms interchangeably. But just so you know that mental wellness is sort of a more broad, encompassing kind of a thing, and mental fitness is the aspirational peak that we're trying to achieve. So mental wellness, the category, is shifting away from it being just a psychology thing, being just about neurotransmitters, and being just about symptom suppression. Those are all going to sort of stay there, but I've been studying this for long enough, 30-ish years, I guess, where psychology was just a brain thing. It was all in your head. It was all about, if you were sad, it was because you didn't have enough serotonin signaling in your brain. Or if you weren't motivated enough, it was a dopamine issue. Or you couldn't relax, it was a GABA issue, right? And those still hold true, right? Those are involved. But what we understand now is that it's not just that. It's moving towards this idea of systems biology, that it's not just one thing, that it's multiple things. I say all the time in my seminars that it's a multifactorial problem, mental wellness issues, and because of that, you need a multifactorial solution. So it could be serotonin or dopamine or GABA, or it could be your inflammation, or it could be a stress hormone like cortisol, or it could be leaky gut, or it could be dysbiosis, which is an imbalance of good and bad bacteria, or could be a zillion other things, right? So you have this multifactorial system where some of that or all of that could be off or out of balance. And so why do you think that one thing like a Prozac pill is going to solve the problem, right? It could, if that's your problem, if that's your one isolated problem, great. Lucky break. You took a Prozac pill and it worked. More likely, though, it's some combination of those being out of balance. And so you need a multifactorial solution. And that's what psychonutrition is. That's what lifestyle is. That's what nature exposure is, and breath work and meditation and movement and all of that kind of stuff that we talk about in the courses that we do. So that's what systems biology is all about. It's about biochemical resilience, right? Getting your system to not just be in alignment, but to be resilient. So when it gets knocked out of alignment, you can get it back into alignment. Okay. So that's something that sometimes I refer to as adaptive capacity that we'll talk about a little bit later. It's moving towards this idea of the gut immune brain connection. It's moving towards this whole new discipline that sometimes is called metabolic psychiatry or metabolic psychology, looking at the metabolism, looking at the underlying biochemistry, and then using psychobiotics and precision nutrition, which I'll talk about as we go through here. So the future of mental wellness is understanding that biochemistry drives behavior. That's the reframing. But unfortunately, our mental wellness system is completely broken. And unfortunately, I've been talking about it being broken for at least a decade. Um, I won't go through all these bullet points. You probably are aware all the ways that it's broken. It's not going in the right direction, right? People are feeling more anxiety and more burnout and more stress and more just feeling kind of crummy, right? Whether they label it as something or not. Some people call it tired and wired. And it really is becoming normalized. And what I mean by that is that I run into a lot of people who feel terrible. Their mood isn't where they want it to be. Their stress isn't where they want it to be. They can't relax. They can't get a good night's sleep. They're fatigued during the day. They just feel kind of blah all the time. And it's being normalized means they go, well, I guess this is just how it is, right? I don't have a perfect diet. I don't exercise the way that I should. I'm getting older. I look around and I see that all my friends feel the same way. I guess this is normal. And it's not normal at all. And that's the broken piece of it, is that it's becoming normalized. It's becoming typical, right? Typical, right? Lots of people are in this category, but it isn't really normal. It is an abnormal situation when we think about what the human situation should be, which is abundant energy during the day, ability to relax and get good quality sleep at night, the ability to not have brain fog and instead be energetic and motivated and focused and creative and impactful and all those kinds of things during the day. But mental wellness has become medicalized, right? It's very often talked about as a disease situation. When I talk about it, when I talk about small a anxiety and small d depression, those are mood states, right? If somebody wakes up in the morning and they go, I'm feeling kind of depressed. You didn't just diagnose yourself with major depressive disorder, right? It's like this is the normal way that people talk. It's part of our vocabulary, and it's a little bit shifting, right? It's not about being happy all the time, 24/7. It's about being resilient. So when you get knocked off course, you can bounce back. And that is largely ignored by mainstream medicine, right? That's the medicalization of it. If somebody comes into their doctor and they say, "Hey, I feel kind of crummy in any of the ways that I just described," they get in 5 minutes they get prescribed a Xanax or a Prozac or a Zoloft or like that style drug. Um, and that's not probably the solution, right? It's not solving inflammation issues. It's not solving a problem at the level of the microbiome. It's not helping with your circadian biology, which is one of the trends that we're going to talk about. It's not. None of the doctors talk about nutrition. When I taught at the university level, we would teach the medical students for one day out of their 4 years of medical school about nutrition, right? And that's not very helpful. They don't talk about stress physiology, but that's not their training. So they're not able to download that information, right? You get that information from somebody like me, or a dietitian, or a holistic nutrition professional, or licensed nutritionist or something like that. And here's the other piece of it: we have kind of separated the mind and the body. We have forgotten that they're not separate things. They're actually connected, right? What I have here is your brain is not floating in isolation inside your skull. It's connected to everything. It used to be taught in medical schools that the brain was privileged. It was immune privilege, right? That it was separate from the rest of the body, and that we know now is just absolutely false. And so we'll talk about that as we go through. And because of all of that, because of the problems with how mental wellness is viewed by the medical establishment in general, and I guess I would say by society in general, um, this category of alternative mental wellness modalities is growing like gangbusters. People have tried the SSRIs, the selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. They have tried the anti-anxiety drugs. They have tried, drinking more Red Bulls. They have tried, all the things that are trying to get them out of this quagmire of feeling kind of crummy all the time. And people are looking for more and more kinds of things. And so this is a chart from the Global Wellness Institute showing that the mental wellness category, looking at lifestyle, looking at nutrition, looking at meditation and mindfulness and those sorts of things, is growing double digits year over year. And it's projected to keep growing for the foreseeable future because this is a big, big problem in the world that is not being adequately addressed by the kinds of things that are on offer, at least in the mainstream. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some of the things that I think can solve this problem for the literally the millions of people that are suffering with it. And part of it is the evolution of how science is showing us that it's not just a brain thing, right? For the last 10 years or so, I've been very, very vocal about talking about the idea of, hey, it is a brain thing, but it's more a gut brain thing, right? And that's what I've really been talking about. Over the last 2 years or so, it has evolved into more of a gut immune brain thing, where the immune system is at least equally important to the gut and the microbiome. And so it's a three-part system now. So the old thinking is that it was just the brain and neurotransmitters and behavior, right? I sort of started off tonight with that. And now it's evolved to a more nuanced model where the microbiome, the bacteria in your gut, is involved. They will send a signal. Those trillions of bacteria will send a signal through your immune system. And I'll show you how that works in just a little bit. Maybe through your vagus nerve, which is a hardwired connection between your gut and your brain, through different aspects of your metabolism, like your inflammatory markers and things like that, and then to the brain. So it's a much more nuanced, much more precise understanding of how these signals are actually getting to the brain. Some of them are still produced in the brain, right? So this still holds, right? The brain and the neurotransmitters in the brain, that's still part of this overall system. But probably 80% of the signals are actually going through this new model, and only 20% of the signals are actually produced in the brain itself. And that is a paradigm shift in how we're understanding the underlying biochemistry. And if that's the case, if the science is telling us that we've been missing, 80% or so of the problem, it means we really need to rethink what our modalities are, rethink what our solutions are. If we've been, it's a proverbial tip of the iceberg is what we've been focusing on before, and most of this problem is actually the bulk of the iceberg that is under the surface of the water. And what that means is that 50 to 90% of our neurotransmitters are made in the gut. So here we're talking about 90% of our serotonin, 70% of our dopamine, 50% of our GABA, 70 or so percent of our oxytocin, et cetera, et cetera. One of the reasons that's really important is that in addition, 70 to 80% of our immune system is associated with the gut. And because of that close association between where our neurotransmitters are being made and the fact that our immune system is concentrated in the gut, it's the perfect opportunity for those two systems, if you will, signaling systems, to directly interact with each other. And that's why the immune system has become such an important part of this gut-brain axis. So the gut immune brain axis. And, here we have all the neurotransmitters and other signaling molecules: serotonin, dopamine, GABA, short-chain fatty acids, inflammatory cytokines, cortisol signaling, and lots and lots of other ones. And the thing that makes it so exciting as a psychonutritionist is that this food mood connection is the most direct way to change all of this stuff. Whenever we eat or drink something, it is a direct physical change in the microbiome, in the gut. You're physically applying that food or beverage to the thing that is making the signaling molecules. And then there's a physical connection between those signaling molecules and the immune system and the vagus nerve. And then those signals travel out from the gut to the rest of the body, right? Chiefly the brain we're talking about tonight, but also other parts of the body. We can leave that to the side for now. Here's an example of that. So happy ferments. I hope that the people who are watching right now eat your fermented foods, because it's one of the big takeaways from tonight, right? What we understand about the future of mental wellness is that fermented foods is going to be a part of our future, because of how they work across the gut immune axis. We can think of the immune system sort of as the middle manager that translates those gut signals into brain signals and exerts those effects in the brain. A really cool study just came out a couple of days ago. I have a video that's going to post up tomorrow, outlining this study, and I'm going to post the actual study in our mental fitness community. But here's a couple bullet points about what they found. It was a study where they fed people kimchi versus a placebo. So what they found, fermented foods, kimchi in this case, altered immune system signaling at the cellular level. So in this paper, it was pretty dense paper where they used some very cool cellular techniques to measure the immune system of individual cells. And what they found was that the kimchi improved immune coordination without generalized immune system activation. So this is something that my students would understand as immune system priming versus immune system stimulating. The difference there is that if you overstimulate your immune system, you will very often set off an inflammatory reaction. If you can just get your immune system primed, so it's ready, so it's paying attention, so to speak, that can help you with, the standard immune system things, right? Less viruses, less colds, less flus, more resilient to infections and things like that. But you also see benefits for for psychological mood state. You see motivation levels are higher. You see fatigue levels are lower. You see that people can concentrate better, so less brain fog. All the mental wellness parameters are improved if your immune system is primed. But this also, so there's a mental wellness benefit. There's also implications for autoimmunity. So this might be something where we can use fermented foods or the signaling pathways of fermented foods to dial down the immune system in people who have autoimmune system problems or allergies. Allergies are your immune system being overactive. This could be important for inflammatory conditions, and it can be important for overall resilience, which is your ability to handle stress and bounce back from being set off kilter. So this is a simple intervention, kimchi, but it was a very complex analysis at the level of the immune system about what that fermented food does. We'll talk about why that is in just a second. Um, the other thing that I think is important for us to understand is the rise of what we call multibiotics. So this is moving us in waves. So the first wave of biotics was all about probiotics. These are the beneficial bacteria that we can take: the lactobacilli, the bifidobacterium, the akkermansias, good bacteria that we can use to have a pro health effect in the body. It might be an immune system benefit, it might be a mood benefit, it might be a digestive benefit, etc. Right? So the first wave was to actually supplementing with the beneficial bacteria. The second wave was about prebiotics. These are typically fibers that feed the bacteria. So there are benefits of prebiotics on their own. There are benefits of probiotics on their own. The sort of like second and a half wave, I guess, would be what we call synbiotics, where you're combining probiotics and prebiotics together. And that's a little fraught because some companies do it well, some companies do it poorly. The third wave, which is only a couple of years old, is around postbiotics. You can think of these as the signals that are coming from the bacteria. And so sometimes these signals are metabolic signals, sometimes they're immune system signals, sometimes they're appetite signals. So some of these postbiotics can be used to help with metabolism and weight loss and blood sugar control and things like that. And the next wave, the wave that we are just right now on the cusp of, is multibiotics. It's this idea of coordinating the collection of all of these different signals in that idea of a systems approach, where you're combining prebiotics and probiotics and postbiotics and phytobiotics, which are plant extracts that have signaling qualities, all in the same kind of an idea. And just so you understand that this is not it's not like a kitchen sink approach, right? I guess some products could be a kitchen sink approach where you might see products that are like, oh, sure, it's a multibiotic because it's got a probiotic strain and it's got some random prebiotic, and we threw a postbiotic in there, and there are products like that. But if you think of it in a very precision nutrition, systems biology perspective, you're actually asking yourself, all right, what is the signal this probiotic is delivering? What is the signal this prebiotic is delivering? And et cetera, et cetera. And the reason that we know that this is a trend, I guess, right? This is part of the future of the biotics category and the mental fitness category, is because NutraIngredients, which is kind of like the Wall Street Journal of the nutraceutical industry, just published this a couple of days ago. These are two quotes from an article where they're looking at trends, just like we're looking at trends right now. Here's the first quote. There's been a clear shift away from basic gut health support towards something far more multifaceted, including psychobiotics, the gut-brain axis, and related applications. And then later in the article, it said, we see biotics moving into mind and mood, particularly psychobiotics producing GABA aminobutyric acid, which is GABA, which is your body's primary relaxing neurotransmitter, to improve sleep quality. So these biotics are very quickly moving away from being just gut health to being overall systems integrators, if you will. And one of the great systems that we can modulate is our mental wellness, is how we feel, right? Is our psychological mood state because of what we're understanding about the gut brain axis, the gut immune brain axis. So this systems thinking comes at it from multiple perspectives. How does and trying to understand how this piece integrates, how this other part of the puzzle, how this other part of the puzzle, how they all sort of link in together. So we think of these microbial systems as ecosystems, like as if they were a garden or a rainforest or like an integrated system where if you change one piece, it's going to change another piece and another piece and another piece. Another way I like to describe it is that it's like a biochemical dominoes game, right? Where you set off one thing and that changes something else and something else and something else and something else, right? And so you have to really think of that whole system, not just one piece in isolation, which has been the prevailing wisdom for the last couple of decades. So fermentation metabolites, plant polyphenols, immune system modulation, and synergistic signaling. And the way to get there is to stop thinking about single strain or single magic bullet ingredients. Single strain probiotics are like trying to fix an orchestra with one violin, right? You're going to get an effect. I don't want to say that using one single strain or one single ingredient isn't going to do anything. It's going to do something, but we can get a much better effect, a much more holistic effect if we really think it through. So systems in action, right? How can this sounds a little bit esoteric. I get that. But how can you actually learn from that and put it into action? It's this. So I gave you the example of kimchi in the study that just came out a couple of days ago. But we've known this for other fermented foods already. In some other studies that I've presented to my students, we can use specific strains of bacteria that have been isolated from kimchi to treat things like leaky gut or eczema. There are data looking at yogurts, feeding people different yogurts with different collections of bacteria in them can change your resilience. It can change your perception of how should I say this? Of adverse events. So, in these trials, what they did was they gave people either a placebo yogurt or a yogurt with live cultures in it. And the one with live cultures, and then both groups were put into MRI machines, so the researchers could see what aspects of their brain were being lit up. And by changing what was happening in the microbiome with the yogurt, you could change how the brain was firing in response to different kinds of images that they were shown. So the people would be shown, disturbing images, and they would be able to measure in the brain what parts of the brain are lighting up, and are they set off from it, right? Are they having a stress response from this, or are they calmer? Are they more resilient? And the yogurt with the strains, it actually helped with brain calmness, right? So like that kind of thing it's mind blowing when you think about like that's an example of the food mood connection. There are hundreds of studies at this point about the Mediterranean diet and how the Mediterranean diet, not a specific diet, but a Mediterranean style diet, eating more fruits and vegetables, eating fermented foods, eating lots of flavonoids, eating lots of fiber, eating healthy fats, eating lean proteins, eating a really delicious diet can reduce depression, reduce anxiety, improve overall well-being. That again, food mood connection. Fiber diversity leading to microbiome diversity. We talk in our course a lot about the 30 plant challenge. I'm not going to get into that too much tonight, but suffice to say, the more plants that you eat, the more good bacteria you're going to grow in your gut. And as a result of that, you're going to have more of the good signals that will lead to you feeling better and more resilient. Eating a rainbow diet, eating more colors in your diet. Those colors are indicative of phytonutrient diversity. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a few minutes. Things like polyphenols. And this is the same philosophy. This systems thinking is the same philosophy that I built into my flagship product called Zenith, which is right here. This is Zenith, gut brain resilience for everyday excellence. This is my multibiotic, right? It's what I call a protobiotic because it has all of the different biotics in it. It's got four probiotics, a blend called bifidin that's been shown to help with mood and resilience and sense of calm. People who supplement with bifidin have improvements in stress, improvements in resilience, improvements in how they feel and how they sleep. Their sleep quality is better. Um, there is a prebiotic blend, two different prebiotics that specifically help with neurotransmitter production. There's a postbiotic blend, which are the signals, right? So one of them is an Akkermansia postbiotic, one of them is an amino acid postbiotic that help with metabolism and appetite control and glucose balance and leaky gut and sense of calmness. And then there's a phytobiotic blend, phytobiotics being plant extracts that have signaling qualities across the gut-brain axis. There's a pine bark for focus. There's an American ephedra for energy. There's a Rafuma leaf for overall mood. And so you see the system coming together this way. If we understand the biochemistry, then we can say, aha, we want to change this aspect of biochemistry. How can we do that? We can use this probiotic or this postbiotic or this prebiotic or this phytobiotic to deliver that change in biochemistry. And if we understand that the biochemistry is this dominoes game of link to link to link to link, systems thinking, then we can get a more holistic overall effect and the experience of, having, lower feelings of anxiety and better sleep quality and better metabolism and better sense of calmness and better mood and better focus and better energy and better neurotransmitters and all that kind of stuff. The experience is you're more resilient so that when stress comes, what hits the fan, you're able to go, okay, and bounce back from that, right? And solve the problem and navigate that stressful situation. That's what systems thinking is all about. Okay. So let's get back to these trends. So the big five trends that I'm seeing out there right now are right here. And I'm gonna go through each of them in turn. But I'm also gonna talk about how you can use that trend and how you can harness it in your own life. So the five big trends are mental wellness will become biochemical. I've already sort of teased you about that a little bit. Immune health will equal brain health, and we'll think about if we don't have a strong immune system, we don't have a strong brain, and vice versa, right? Because they talk to each other. Longevity will equal mental longevity. So longevity isn't just about living longer, it's about living longer well. And mental acuity, mental cognition is a big, big part of that. We're going to talk about personalized mental wellness, right? Because mental wellness for me isn't the same thing as mental wellness for you or the next person or the next person. It's a little nuanced what it means to each person. And then food is information, and I've already talked about that a little bit, so I'll go through that part really quickly. But really importantly, how can you harness this science for yourself or your clients or your patients? Okay, so mental wellness will become biochemical. What I mean by this is that for a long time, and I've been an advocate of this, that mental wellness, you know it when you feel it, right? If you make a positive change, you're going to feel better and you're going to know you feel better. If you make a negative change, you're going to feel worse and you're going to know you feel worse, right? That's been the prevailing wisdom, right? That's been the line for a long time. And I've been an advocate of that line. I write about it in the mental fitness book that, all the things that I recommend in this book, if you do them, you're going to feel better. And feeling better is the proof. That's what you really care about, right? It doesn't matter if I show you, whoops, it doesn't matter if I show you, oh, look, your cortisol is down 20% or your serotonin is up 20%. It doesn't matter what that says if you're not feeling it, right? So like I still believe that. But I think we're getting a lot better in terms of understanding that underlying biochemistry. And one of the things that I like to use sometimes, and I do this with, some of my VIP clients, we will do measures on them, right? To find if they're not feeling better, right? So if we do an intervention and it's just not gaining traction, it's not delivering the benefits we think it should, there's something that's blocking. and we can use the biochemical analysis to see what those blockers are. So consumers will increasingly start to measure inflammation and cortisol rhythm and glucose variability and heart rate variability and microbiome patterns and sleep architecture and things like that. I don't usually start with this stuff. I do have colleagues that do. I don't think it's necessary. It's usually really expensive. It's hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars to get into some of these measurements. But what I like to do is I like to start with an intervention that makes sense based on what the person is telling me they're experiencing, right? They're experiencing brain fog, or they're experiencing, anhedonia, which is like not having fun at anything. They're having sleep quality problems, whatever the issue is, right? We can make some good educated guesses about what might be off and develop a regimen to get them back on balance. And usually that works. Like I would say 8 out of 10 times that works very well for most people. For the 2 out of 10, for the 20% of people, sometimes they're getting some benefits, but not all the benefits. They're feeling better in certain ways, but not other ways. There's just something that's not quite delivering, right? It's not quite hitting. And that's when I will say, let's do some analysis. Let's pee in a cup. Let's take a blood sample. Let's do a poop swab. Let's, all the different ways that we can measure these things, and then we can find out, right? So it's not always needed, but it can be very useful to find where those blockers are, and that's going to lead to an emergence of specialists in metabolic psychiatry or nutritional psychology, or like what I do, specializing in developing psychobiotic supplements, to really help people hone in on those nuanced areas. The next big trend: immune health equaling brain health. So neuroinflammation may underlie all of these things that we get labeled with: depression, anxiety, brain fog, cognitive decline, burnout. And without getting to the root of the problem, without calming that neuroinflammation, anything you try to do on top of that will be spinning wheels, right? Will not be delivering dividends. And so I'll give you an example. You have somebody who has brain fog or some sort of cognitive, I was just about to say deficit, but deficit's probably not the right way to say it. You have somebody who can't focus or can't stay on task, right? They might sort of self-diagnose themselves and say like, "Oh, I've got ADHD" or something like that, right? So that person might say, "Oh, I'm going to take a nootropic. I'm going to take a theanine. I'm going to take a pine bark. I'm going to take I might take a Ritalin or saffron, or whatever the case may be," and it doesn't really deliver the benefits. And they go, "Oh, that didn't work for me." Well, one of the reasons it might not have worked for you is because the real problem might have been neuroinflammation. It might have been that your brain is inflamed. We talk about chronic inflammation in the body all the time, and chronic inflammation leading to a lot of disease states. We have to also think about inflammation in the brain, and that being one of the things that can really block your neurotransmitters, block your serotonin, block your norepinephrine, block your acetylcholine, all that kind of stuff that helps with focus. So the real problem isn't that you need to focus harder. You need to get rid of the thing that's blocking your ability to focus. And so it might not be like, in any of those solutions that I just said, it might be getting rid of that neuroinflammation. And so some of these future mental wellness strategies are going to focus on regulating immunity, because the immune system is really where a lot of that inflammation is coming from in the first place, reducing the inflammatory signaling, improving your overall resilience. I'm going to talk about all the ways that we do this. What is the action that we actually take in order to deliver this to ourselves or to our clients, as the slides go through. But a lot of this brain inflammation comes to us because we have leaky gut, and that's causing gut inflammation. So the gut becomes inflamed, the brain becomes inflamed. And when you have both of those, then you're in a really bad situation, right? So in order to get the neuroinflammation down, we have to first get the gut inflammation down. And in order to do that, we have to solve the leaky gut problem. I'm not going to talk at all about leaky gut tonight. I've done deep dives on leaky gut. You can go search them on YouTube or find them in the mental fitness community. Leaky gut is maybe one of the most insidious, misunderstood modern ailments of our time. And if we can solve leaky gut, we can solve lots of problems for people. We can solve all these neuroinflammation problems. We can solve a lot of immune system problems, a lot of autoimmune system problems, a lot of problems that masquerade as things like long COVID or fibromyalgia or chronic fatigue syndrome. All have their, when I say that all things come back to the gut, that's why I say all things come back to the gut, because a lot of these sort of amorphous syndromes that a lot of people struggle with really are just the manifestations of, them having poor gut integrity. So anyway, I'll just leave that there. Go if you want more information about leaky gut. I've talked about it in a lot of other places. Okay, the next big trend for the future of mental wellness is that longevity will include mental longevity. And think about this, right? You don't, I mean, you don't want to live a long time and have your body break down on you. You don't want to live a long time and have your mind break down on you. And so, there's a lot of people who are working on the longevity side with the body side. There was just the enhanced games just happened in Las Vegas, over the Memorial Day weekend. And people were taking all kinds of, drugs to improve their physical performance. But I'm actually more scared of this. I'm more scared of like losing my mental faculties as I get older, and I don't want to be in a situation where I don't have good cognition, I don't have good emotional resilience, any of that kind of stuff. So anyway, like you don't want to live to be 100, but your brain only lived to be 80, so to speak, right? And people increasingly want these things. They want to have good cognition into long life, right? Obviously, emotional resilience, social connection, purpose, stress adaptability. These are all really, really important things. I talked in the last Wellness Wednesday, the last mental fitness with Doc Talbot. I talked for some time about the Harvard Adult Development Study, sometimes called the Harvard Longevity Study, because at WOHASU, at the World Happiness Summit, one of the key principal investigators was there to give an update about the study. And so in the Harvard Development Study, their question is, what makes a good life? What makes a happy life? And it comes down to relationships and having a purpose in life and being able to contribute to others and having resilience, being able to get, knocked down and get back up again. All of these are are dependent on having good mental longevity. And so you can't have any of that if that goes away. So I think that longevity will increasingly wrap in this idea of it's not just a body thing, it's also a mind thing. And I think that's a very important development that we're seeing. Personalized mental wellness. This is the idea that future interventions are going to use some of the testing that I talked about before, but are also going to use other things. So, microbiome analysis, wearable data, cortisol mapping, AI guided nutrition, adaptive supplementation. I'm actually working on an app right now that uses AI, and so you'll be able to go on the app and it will learn you. It's all programmed with all the stuff that I talk about, but then we also integrate other things where, it might be pulling from one of my videos or pulling from one of my books, but then it's personalizing for the individual based on using artificial intelligence. Some of it will integrate with wearables, right? So right now I had my Apple Watch on earlier today when I went paddleboarding. So I would have had three wearables today: my Apple Watch, my Aura Ring, and my Whoop Band. Right? They're all measuring different things. There's some overlap, but they're all measuring different things, and those can be integrated into an app. So I can see, like, how am I feeling? What is my body measuring? What am I doing to change that? What does my sleep pattern look like? What does my diet look like today? How does my sleep quality change when I have 2 glasses of wine at dinner instead of 0 glasses of wine at dinner? Like those kinds of things. And that's going to be different for me, right? I might have a glass of wine after this webinar tonight, and there might be somebody on the call that doesn't have any glasses of wine ever. Right. So, like, that's a difference that, an AI guided nutrition could really, really help us with to give a true personalization for each individual. The other thing that I'm working on through this app is something called adaptive capacity index. That's a big word for resilience, is another way of thinking about it. So adaptive capacity is something that comes from engineering. And it's the ability of a system to be able to not just withstand stress, but bounce back from that stress. And so I've adapted that sort of engineering concept to this idea of how can we improve resilience in an individual person. So I've got it as ability of a person to adjust to challenges, cope with change, or take advantage of new opportunities, which is a core component of resilience. And adaptive capacity index, or ACI, determines how effectively a system can recover from or adapt to stresses and shocks. And that's the real important thing that I'm seeing. People don't come to me to help them lower their stress, right? There's a zillion ways you can do that. You can, meditation, mindfulness, breath work, gratitude, there's so many different ways to do it. You can download the Calm app. You can download, whatever. You guys get the idea. People come to me instead not to lower their stress, but to improve their ability to handle stress. That's what resilience is about. That's what adaptive capacity is about. So that you can take on more until you break, but when something sets you off, when something knocks you down, you can bounce back up again. And it's not about, let me just say this. It's not about being a tough guy, right? This is one of the things that I talked to some people about at the World Happiness Summit. It's not about just being, a belligerent jerk and saying, like, I'm tougher than everybody else, I can handle it, because you can't. As I wrote about in the book, um, even the toughest people on the planet, Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Special Forces men and women, they have a breaking point too. Professional athletes have a breaking point. Moms, who are some of the toughest people on the planet, have a breaking point. It's not about trying to be tough and white knuckle your way through. It's about being resilient at the biochemical level. Biochemistry drives behavior over and over again. Okay. And then food is information. Food isn't just calories. Food isn't just yummy. It is like we want to enjoy our food, but food is biochemical information. Every time we eat or drink, it's a signal to the immune system, or to your microbiome, or to your metabolism, or to your circadian rhythm, which is your sort of light dark, time clocks and things like that. So every time we choose something to eat or drink, we're not just feeding ourselves, we're programming a biochemical ecosystem. And if we think of it that way, I think of it that way, it helps me choose the right foods. It helps me very strategically say, this is how I'm going to eat. This is how I'm going to supplement. This is how I'm going to stay hydrated. This is how I'm going to have 1 glass of wine instead of 2 glasses of wine, or sometimes 2 glasses of wine, but everything in moderation. Because that's information that's going to take us one way, sort of a good direction or a bad direction. How can we harness this science, right? With all of that as like the background of where the science is taking us into the future, how can we harness all of that? Well, we can feed our microbiome diversity. We can protect our circadian biology. We can control inflammation. We can build mental fitness, and we can support the GIBA, which is the gut immune brain axis. And I'm going to take each one of these separately and give you a few bullet points about how you can do each one of those, right? So it'll be like, flashcards, so to speak. And I got to tell you, the science is pretty complex, right? The science that is telling us this is the future, has been done by lots of different research groups in lots of different parts of the world, in lots of different model systems. So it's very complex science, but the application of that science, like what to do with it, is actually pretty simple. I think as I go through these next 5 slides, I think some of it you're going to go, really? Duh, that's it? It really can't be that simple. But sometimes the simplest application of complex science is the most effective thing. Okay? And you'll get a perspective for that as I go through. So how do we feed our microbiome diversity? Well, if you're one of my students, you've heard me say this 1 billion times, which is the 3 F's: fiber, flavonoids, and there's a little extra bullet point here that I'll come back to, and fermented foods. So we already talked about the fermented foods a little bit. And I've done a whole deep dive on fiber. I've done a whole nother deep dive on fermented foods. I've done another whole deep dive on flavonoids and other phytonutrients. Flavonoids are one category of colorful plant phytonutrients: polyphenols, carotenoids, flavonoids, thiols, lignans. There's a whole bunch of them. But the reason that we tell people to eat a rainbow of a diet is because we want you to get some purple and some yellow and some orange and some red and some green, right? Those are all indicative of different phytonutrients, flavonoids being one category of those phytonutrients. So if you just did that, if you just did those 3 F's for your guiding principle of what you're choosing to eat every day, you're pretty much done, right? That's 90% of what you need to do from a nutrition standpoint. Uh, the rest of it, the next 10% is icing on the cake, right? If we want to talk about, different oils, and we want to talk about different types of protein, fine, we can have those discussions. But these are the things that are really going to move the needle for you if you can focus on those. We can also think about little nuances of good mood foods, right? We can get more olive oil. I just did a couple of videos about choosing the right kinds of olive oil and things like that, and why they have good fatty acids and polyphenols. We can do cocoa flavonoids and coffee polyphenols, omega 3s, which I'll talk about in a little bit in a little more detail in just a second. We can do green tea and theanine, but these are all nice to haves, right? Don't get too focused on those, because the big important things are those 3 F's. Get your fiber, get your flavonoids, get your fermented foods, and you're gonna solve a lot of the dietary issues and feed your microbiome the way that it needs to be fed. Protecting your circadian biology. This one is also very easy when you break it down. And I like to break circadian biology is basically your light dark signals. It is your 24-hour body clock. It's why we can wake up with good energy or being fatigued. It's why we can go to sleep at night and be able to fall asleep easily and get good quality sleep, or we have trouble winding down and we're restless and we're tense and we can't fall asleep and we wake up in the night and stuff like that. Well, one of those is good circadian biology. One of them is disrupted circadian biology. But it's surprisingly easy, if you are disrupted, to get yourself back into balance with sort of 3 steps. In the early part of the day, you want to get exposure to light. And if you can get early morning sunlight, that is the absolute best thing for you to do. Even if you're just going outside to pick up the newspaper from your driveway, if you still get a paper newspaper. We run a bed and breakfast, so we get a paper newspaper for our guests. So I'm outside every single morning. I see the bright sunshine for at least a few minutes. If I could do it for 10 minutes, that's great. So while I'm picking up the newspaper, I might go and, pick a few weeds, or, go walk into the backyard, or, go check what's happening up and down the road, right? It doesn't have to be a long time, just a little bit of maybe 10 minutes of morning sunlight exposure, and you're done. Like that's the first part of your day. The mid part of the day is all about meal timing. So I don't want to get into too much detail tonight about intermittent fasting or time restricted eating, right? I've done other deep dives about those that you can find, at DocTalbott.com, on my YouTube channel, on the mental fitness community. This for different people can be different things. Some people are going to follow a 16-8 kind of a fasting eating window. Some people might do other ways of doing it. But meal timing, when you're eating, not just what you're eating, like I talked about on the last slide, but when you're eating it is really important. So you don't want to eat too late. You don't want to eat, throughout the entire day, unless you do. There's certain people that we do want to have graze, and we don't want them to time restrict their eating. But that meal timing will have a huge impact on your overall circadian biology. And then the last part is what you do later in the day. And this is all about sleep quality. And it's about, just like the early morning is about getting light signals, the late part of the day is about getting dark signals. This means having your bedroom as dark as possible. It should be like a tomb. It should be like a cave in your bedroom. And from the time that you eat your dinner, your existence should get dimmer and dimmer and darker until you're in that blackout zone of your bedroom while you're sleeping for 8 hours, right? If you just did those three things, like on the last slide, it was just, those three things: fiber, flavonoids, and fermented foods. Here, it's morning sunlight, meal timing, and evening darkness. Those are the big triggers, right? Those are the big levers that you have access to changing. And so for me, my meal timing is most days. I'm not. I wake up around 6 o'clock every morning. I don't eat until around noon. Um, so that's my restricted window. That doesn't work for everybody. It doesn't even work for me on days when I do a hard workout in the morning. Then I have to eat. So like that meal timing can be sort of adjusted based on what you need to do. But those are the three important things. Control inflammation is the next way to harness this science. And how do we do that? One way we do it is by moving our bodies. Whenever we move our bodies, walking, running. This morning, my exercise was stand-up paddleboarding. Our bodies make these compounds. Anytime we contract our muscles, we make these things called myokines, which are signaling molecules that can signal happiness. They can help reduce stress. They can signal hopefulness. So anytime we move our bodies, it's good. We want to make sure that we recover, right? So you want to move, but you also want to allow your body to recover. And the way that we can do that is by stimulating something called autophagy. This is how cells and tissues and organs clean themselves and repair themselves. We can we want to have good blood sugar stability. This is all about maintaining our metabolism. That mostly involves glucose, but it can involve fatty acids and things like that. We can control inflammation through getting enough omega-3s. Most of us don't get nearly enough omega-3s. It's one of the reasons, and the omega-3s are mostly coming from fatty fish, salmon, mackerel, sardines, bluefish, that kind of stuff, the kind of fish that most people don't eat because it's fishy fish. So one of the reasons that I recommend fish oil supplements to almost everybody, because these essential fatty acids, EPA and DHA, do so much in the body for your brain, for your blood vessels, for your heart, for your mood, for your inflammation. And we just don't get enough of them. So supplementing with them is typically a good thing for most people. Stress buffering, this usually comes down to modulating cortisol. So if anybody knows the Michael Pollan quip about, what are you supposed to do with your diet? His response is eat food, not too much, mostly plants, which I think pretty much sums it up from a nutrition standpoint. You could do the same thing when we talk about controlling inflammation and moving your body. We want you to move, not too much, because you can do it, you can overdo it, right? You want to be able to move, but then recover, the first two bullet points, and do it mostly every day. So, that doesn't mean that you're exercising every day, but you're definitely moving your body every day. So I did stand-up paddleboarding today. Tomorrow, I might just, work around the yard. I might cut the grass and pull some weeds and work in the garden, right? And then the next day, I might go for a bike ride. And then the next day, I might go for a run. And then the next day, I might walk my dog, right? So like moving every day is a habit to get into, not from a weight loss control perspective, not from a fitness control perspective. Those are nice, but from an inflammatory balance perspective, along with these other things. Okay. How do you build mental fitness? Well, this comes down to, lots of things that we've learned from the Harvard longevity study. Social connection, having a purpose in life, emotional regulation, which is basically teaching ourselves to respond in a stressful situation versus reacting to it. This is something that I find myself having to remind myself about because I tend to be a person with a short fuse, um, and get irritated by idiots. Everybody does, but there's ways that we can manage that to build our mental fitness. And this one, understanding that stress isn't just a brain event. It's not just an emotional event. It's also a microbiome event. Anytime we're stressed out, anytime we're sleep deprived, anytime we're irritated, anytime that we're having some like a fight or flight reaction of some sort, it's also a microbiome event, meaning it changes microbiome diversity, it changes gut permeability. That's another way of saying leaky gut. It changes immune system signaling and it changes neurotransmitter production. So, I talk a lot about the bottom up, where the second brain, the microbiome and the gut is sending signals up to the brain. But we also have to remember that it's a two-way communication. It's not just bottom up, it's also top down, where when we're stressed out, that's changing the bacteria that grows in our microbiome, changing it away from good bacteria towards bad bacteria, which are more inflammatory, which lead more to leaky gut, which lead to more inflammation, which leads to more immune system disruption. So we really have to think of our mental fitness being, a combination of these things. How do we support the gut immune brain action, that GIBA that I said before? Well, it has to be a multibiotic strategy, right? Based on the new science, it can't be just a probiotic or just a prebiotic supplement. It really has to be that coordinated systems approach of not again, not just a kitchen sink approach of saying, "Oh, let's just throw all these biotics into one conglomeration and that's going to be the solution." It really has to be well thought out. I'm very, very proud of Zenith. I think Zenith is one of the reasons that we were named Startup Star for 2026 here at Three Waves, because it really is a well thought out gut brain axis system. And I showed you all the different biotics that are in there. But so let me shift to this, which is my second to last slide. How can coaches use this, right? So all those little flashcards that I just went through are things that anybody can use. We can all use those bullet points in our own lives. How can coaches use this to and practitioners with your clients and your patients? Well, you could dive deep and you could become a mental wellness coach. You could get that high level of training around psychobiotics and around stress resilience and around adaptive capacity frameworks. That's what our certified mental wellness coach program is all about. The future really belongs to people who can do this integration. And so not just be one type of coach or one type of practitioner. If you can have more of that training around nutrition and psychology and physiology and lifestyle medicine and microbiome science, so you can bring that integrated approach, that systems biology thinking, you're going to be able to help your clients and your patients at a much, much deeper level. They'll get better benefits if you can integrate all these different pieces. So I would say half of the people who have gone through our program already have some sort of a practice. They already know the nutrition piece and they want to know more about gut physiology. They already know the medicine piece. They want to know more about the microbiome. They already know the physiology piece. They want to know more about you guys get the idea, right? Being able to be multifactorial in your approach is gonna be, much more effective. So where do we go from here? We have to keep in mind that mental wellness it is no longer about just managing symptoms, right? It's not just getting people to feel less bad. That was good, right? That was good when that's what we had access to. Getting someone who feels crummy to feel less crummy is fine, I guess. But we're in a place now where we can get that person who feels crummy to feel good again. And in my class, I say to people all the time, there's one aspect of we can turn down a negative signal and help somebody feel less bad, or we can turn up a good signal to help somebody feel better. So, which is the right approach? Well, the right approach is to do both of those simultaneously. Let's turn down a signal like inflammation so somebody feels less bad, but let's turn up a signal like dopamine so somebody feels more good. And when you do that, you can really get somebody to go to that next level. When we say level up, that's what I'm talking about because it's not just about managing symptoms. It's about creating that biochemical resilience. So you can learn more about this. Like I said, we have paid programs. We have CEUs, we have a mental fitness community, we've got products, we've got all kinds of stuff, but we have lots of free stuff there too. So whatever level you're prepared to dive in at, you can explore the Certified Mental Wellness Coach program. It's endorsed by all the top third-party health organizations out there. You can join the mental fitness community. You don't have to be a certified mental wellness coach to be part of the community. If you go through the coaching program, you automatically get entered into the community, but they also live as separate things. Again, depending on what level you want to become involved. And then you can learn how to help yourself and how to help other people. The future of mental wellness really, it's not the future, it's already here. And most people just haven't connected the dots yet. But this is going to be a thing where, I've been talking about this for, let's say, the last decade. And now you see articles like the one in NutraIngredients that just came out a couple of days ago that are echoing this, that are saying what I've been saying for 10 years, which is great. But I think there's another level to it where 5 years from now, somebody will look at this video and go, well, no, duh. Everybody knows this now. But right now, hardly anybody knows this, right? The early adopters, you who are watching this right now, probably know it, or at least you know it now because we're at the end of the webinar. But most people don't. We'll get to a point 5 or 10 years from now where everybody does, and it's sort of common knowledge. And it's up to us to try to bring this out to as many people as possible. So that's what I wanted to tell you about tonight. That is where I really think the future of mental wellness is going. I'll give you this last slide so you can see all the different places where you can connect with me. Lots of this information, like I said, is at DocTalbott.com, but I've got, free information on all the different social channels, and then, some of the ebooks and courses and things like that. So thanks a lot, everybody, for joining me tonight. I hope this was helpful, and I hope you're able to, plug it into your own lives, and get some benefits out of it. Okay, I'll see you next time.